We'll call this meeting to order. The special called meeting is called to order.
Madam Chairman, I would like to make a motion to enter executive session pursuant to South Carolina Code annotated 30-4-70A2 for the receipt of legal advice pertaining to the application before the board tonight.
Okay, I second that, Madam Chairman.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? So adjourned. We're calling the meeting to order.
And Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to exit executive session and to note that no action was taken or any decisions were made in the executive session.
So, second.
All in favor? Any abstain or deny? So moved. Well, thank you for your patience while we get legal counsel. This meeting of the DRB tonight was scheduled to consider the nomination of the historic stables for inclusion in the Aiken Historic Register as a contributing historic property. Section 2.6.1 of Aiken zoning ordinance provides that the purpose of the Historic Preservation Overlay District is to promote the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the public through preservation and protection of historically, architecturally, and archaeologically valuable areas, sites, structures, objects, districts, and neighborhoods. In recognition of this purpose, Aiken City Council has adopted as its public policy to safeguard the heritage of the city of Aiken so that its historic areas, sites, structures, neighborhood districts, and objects continue to be a distinctive aspect of the city and a visible reminder of the special historical and cultural heritage of the city. Also, to preserve the integrity and stability of neighborhoods and business areas, to conserve and enhance property values of historic areas, sites, structures, districts, neighborhoods, and geographically associated areas, and to promote the continued attraction of businesses, residents, and tourists, thereby strengthening the local economy. Our work as the Aiken's Design Review Board is to ensure and advance these goals. In cases where demolition has been requested, the Design Review Board is required by Section 5.2.3 and 5.2.4.A.1 of Aiken's zoning ordinance to consider the historic character of the structure proposed for demolition if the structure is located within a historic district. Prior to our meeting today, public notice has been provided to the owners of the property and the public in accordance with Section 5.2.2C of the Aiken zoning ordinance. And we do have a quorum tonight. We actually have a full board here tonight. Section 5.2.2 of the Aiken zoning ordinance allows any member of the Design Review Board, any member of City Council, or a board or commission appointed by City Council, or a property owner to initiate designation nominations. For a historic site or district to be listed in the Aiken Historic Register, Section 5.2.2 of the Aiken zoning ordinance allows the Design Review Board to make recommendations to the Planning Commission and City Council. So we tonight are making a recommendation. We're not making a final decision. The the criteria must include that the property is significant in American, South Carolina, or Aiken history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, or culture. In addition, the property must have integrity of location, design, setting, materials, or workmanship that need to be protected or preserved and meets one or more of the following criteria. The property is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to history. The property is associated with the lives of persons significant in history. The property has distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of architecture or construction, represents the work of a master, possesses high artistic values, or represents a significant or distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction. The property has yielded or is likely to yield information important to prehistory or history, or the property is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. The Review Board has before it a nomination which describes why the Hitchcock Stables is eligible for listing in the Aiken Historic Register. I'd like to ask Rebecca Seymour, City Planner and DRB's liaison with the Planning Department, to introduce the application.
Application number DES25-01001. Applicant Faith Hawks is requesting historic designation for the Bostwick Hitchcock Stables located on Lawrence Street Southwest at tax map parcel 105-12-01-006. This property was not included in the 2010 Aiken Historic Resource Survey. It is located in the Historic Overlay District, specifically Historic District 2, and is zoned RSS Single Family Stable. The purpose section of the Design Review Manual on page 4 describes the 3 designation levels within a historic district or historic site as follows. A landmark is a structure that is essential to the character of a historic district or site. The Cushman Vance House and Banksia are 2 examples of structures with landmark status. Both are listed in the Aiken Historic Register as part of a historic district and as historic sites. Noticeable changes to landmarks and structures eligible for landmark status should usually be avoided. Structures that are 50 or more years old that have aesthetic or historical importance are normally classified as contributing. Contributing properties are worthy of preservation, but are often more tolerant of change than properties eligible for landmark status. The Habersham House gatepost, the Saddlebag Cottage, and the Coach House are examples of contributing structures. The loss of a non-contributing structure should not adversely impact the character of a historic site or district. Additionally, Section 5.2.2.b of the zoning ordinance states, for a historic site or historic district to be designated to the Aiken Historic Register, City Council must conclude that it, 1, is significant in American, South Carolina, or Aiken history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, or culture, and 2, has integrity of location, design, setting, materials, or workmanship that needs to be protected or preserved and meets one of or more of the following criteria. It is associated with events that have made a significant contribution to history. It is associated with the lives of persons significant in history. It has distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of architecture or construction, represents the work of a master, possesses high artistic values, or represents a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction. It has yielded or is likely to yield information important in prehistory or history, or it is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The application provides the following description of the present and original physical appearance of the property. The Hitchcock Racing Stable Complex is located immediately west of the Lawrence Street Southwest and north of 525 Lawrence Street Southwest. The primary structures of the complex are 2 parallel stable blocks about 60 feet apart that were originally unconnected. The blocks are oriented roughly southeast to northwest with space for 28 stalls. It appears that the stalls originally opened into the small stable yard separating them. Each block is encircled by a covered shed row that dates to at least the 1920s based on historic photographs. The blocks and shed rows are still intact. According to Aiken County property records, each block, including its associated shed row, is 40 feet wide and 200 feet long. The blocks are constructed of wood and sided with cedar shingles. The corners of each block are rounded. The stables are shown on the 1918 Sanborn map and can be seen in a 1926 photo of Louise Hitchcock. The architect and contractor are unknown. At a later date, 2 covered breezeways were added to connect the shed rows at the end of the stable blocks. Based on the absence of the breezeways on the 1962 Sanborn map, the breezeways were added after 1962 and are not part of the original historic structures. The parcels on which the stables are located also contains 2 sheds, 120 and 144 square feet each, south of the stable blocks. No written references to these sheds have been located, although the current owner refers to them as carriage houses. Only one structure appears at that approximate location on the 1918, 1931, and 1962 maps. A portion of one shed can be seen in a 1928 photo of horses with exercise riders at the racing stables. The current owner has indicated that the sheds were reconstructed, perhaps in the 1970s or 1980s. The reconstruction appears to be consistent with the original structure, in particular the distinctive roofline. At least one of the sheds appears to be repurposed, possibly original, elements including windows, door surrounds, moldings, and cedar siding. One or both sheds might contribute to the historic landscape, but further evaluation is needed to establish this. A low stone wall and stone steps separate the stable area from an upper terrace to the east. A dwelling was located above the steps until at least 1931. It is gone in the 1962 map. Based on a 1926 photograph of Louise Hitchcock, the wall and steps date to at least the 1920s. They contribute to the historic landscape of the stable complex. Other structures on the parcel are a single-family residence, an equipment building, and 2 farm implement buildings. The construction date of the residence is listed as 1957, with its vernacular masonry construction. It does not share the history or architectural character of the stables and sheds. The equipment building and farm implement buildings were constructed in the 1990s and are not historic. The stables are located within the boundaries of Aiken's Historic District 2. The application provides the following designation criteria for the property. In 1875, Celestine Eustace and her ward niece, Louise Eustace, began coming to Aiken each winter for Louise's health. In August 1891, Louise married Thomas Hitchcock, an avid equestrian, and in January of 1892, she brought him to Aiken. Realizing the potential for equestrian activities, in particular fox hunting, polo, and training thoroughbreds, they came again the next winter bringing friends. The Hitchcocks returned to Aiken almost every winter until their deaths, bringing their horses, along with groomsmen, trainers, riders, hounds, beagles, and foxes, to Aiken both for training and for recreation. They ultimately built multiple sets of stables, a racing track, polo fields, and other sporting venues. The Hitchcocks quickly became the focal point of a group of like-minded sports-oriented Northerners, dubbed the Winter Colony, who transformed Aiken from a small southern town to a rustic sporting retreat, touted as the Newport of the South. In 1892, Thomas Hitchcock purchased the Lagar Phoenix home, Monrepos on 5th Street, now Lawrence Street Southwest. Between 1895 through 1904, he also purchased multiple properties in the surrounding area, totaling over 1,000 acres of land that he used to establish equestrian venues. The exact construction date of the stables in question is not known. However, in November 1900, the newspaper reported on 3 new stables now being erected by Mr. Thomas Hitchcock. And in 1902, the newspaper reported that Hitchcock has 2 stables and a private track, both within a short distance of each other. The 2 stables were likely the domestic stables, located at the southeast corner of Newberry Street and Easy Street, now gone, and the racing stables. In 1947, George Pete Bostwick bought the parcel of land containing the racing stables from the trustees for the Thomas and Louise Hitchcock estate. Bostwick added the breezeways connecting the shed rows at the end of each stable block. This was likely done after 1962, since the 1962 Sanborn map of Aiken does not show the breezeways. In 2007, the parcel was subdivided per the plat shown in Attachment 7 of the application. The stables are located within the boundaries of Aiken's Historic District 2. The Hitchcock Racing Stable Complex is significant in Aiken history and retains a high degree of integrity. Specifically, the stables, wall, and steps are in the same location as originally constructed. The setting next to the Hitchcock Woods is essentially the same, and the feeling is very much what it would have been experienced when originally constructed. The design, materials, and workmanship of the primary stable blocks are unchanged. The historic integrity and significance of the sheds requires further evaluation, but it appears at least one contributes to the historic character of the complex. The breezeways added to connect the stables do not contribute to the history of the character. The Hitchcock Racing Stable Complex needs to be protected and preserved based on the following criteria. It has a strong association with events that have made a significant contribution to Aiken history. The stables were a regular gathering place for the equestrian-focused winter colonist and were one of the most notable locations for the winter colony activity. In his 1935 book, Life and Sport in Aiken, Harry Worcester Smith said that the Hitchcock stable yard had been the mecca of all Aiken horse lovers for 40 years. He is clearly referring to the racing stables, since the domestic stables had burned down in the 1920s. It has a strong association with the lives of persons significant in Aiken's history. For over 100 years, every article about Aiken life and every summary of Aiken's history has touted the Hitchcocks, along with Celestine Eustace, as the founders of the winter colony. Mon Repos, the Hitchcock home, was demolished over 50 years ago. The stables are the most tangible structure remaining in commemoration of them. It embodies distinctive architecture. The Hitchcock stables are highly unusual in 3 ways: their shingled exteriors, their rounded corners, and their especially high ceilings allowing for excellent airflow. While there are other stables from that period still in Aiken, the Hitchcock stables stand out. The Hitchcock home was demolished long ago. The Hitchcock racetrack is gone. The stables are the best remaining representation of their legacy and their contribution to Aiken history. Additionally, Historic Aiken Foundation provided additional information concerning the stable's architectural historical significance. This information was added to the record in the work section as Exhibit G, and copies are available outside of council chambers.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Rebecca is reading from the application that was submitted. I'd like to provide the property owners with an opportunity to comment. Would you like to come up and make a comment based on the designation application?
Charlie?
Could you
So
please?
my name
Sorry.
is Tara Bostwick, and I
And-
live at 525 Lawrence Street,
Thank you.
Southwest in Aiken.
I'm Charlie Bostwick, and I live at 525 Lawrence Street.
So thank you for this opportunity. I actually thought we would be speaking after all the comments, because I thought usually people that speak for an application speak first, and then people that speak against an application will speak at the end. Is that not typical?
It's
Public comments is
usually
normally
it's-
done that way?
No, usually it's the owner. And of course, this is new territory for this particular board in terms of doing a designation, but wanted to give you the opportunity first.
Well, I appreciate that, because clearly we didn't have the opportunity to be consulted during this application, and the only time we found out about this application was when the public was notified that this was being presented by Chairman Hawk, so we had no idea. I do have some comments that I thought I would like to make, if that's possible. In your application, Mrs. Hawks, you circled that you were presenting this application as a member of the Historic Preservation Commission, not as a city official elected or appointed. Is that correct?
Actually, I am an appointed
Yes.
member of the board.
Of the DRB, correct.
Yes.
But you circled that you were a member of the Historic Preservation, because I was wondering, were you then doing this application as a member of the Historic Aiken Foundation or as a member of the DRB?
The Design Review Board used to be called the Historic Preservation Commission, so it is one and the same.
Okay, it currently doesn't have that name on there. That was actually a distinct change, I believe, in the city. I don't know how many years ago now, but that was in order to encompass a lot more than just the historic. So that's why, to me, that was a little unclear. We all want the same thing. I think this has been brought to the table because of the application that we have that has yet to be heard by everyone, and we all want to see these stables be something special, and we feel that the application that we have yet to be able to share publicly does exactly what you are trying to do right now. We do take exception to the fact that this application is now coming after our application that was originally put in June 26th. I think that is wrong, and we are going to challenge that, because it's like sort of an 11th hour change as far as we're concerned. I also would argue that the designation or non-designation is not correct. It is, when our application was put in, it was a non-contributing structure. There are a lot of non-contributing properties and structures within the historic district. And so, you know, process is important. I've heard that. I watch all of your meetings. I'm very aware of the importance of process and what that means to the applicants. When we filled out our application and submitted it, and the staff returned it, it was clearly a non-contributing structure. It was not a structure at all. So I would question also the value of making that change at this point. I know in 1990, my husband and I, well, obviously Charlie has lived at this property, I won't say how many years? 67, no, a little bit more than that. There's been two property owners. There's been the Hitchcock family and there's been the Bostwick family. And we have worked very hard to keep these stables in a style that everyone would be proud of. And we are exceptionally pleased with the Kisner's interest to preserve and to stabilize those stables. There are some inaccuracies in the historical report that was presented. Certainly if you had asked the property owners, you may have found more information out that we could have provided. So I don't think that those inaccuracies are necessarily material. The only thing that I think should be noted is the stables that may be referred to as the, in the application, I can't remember, there was the staff stables or the, that was actually the Hitchcock family's stable, and in reference to the Life and Sport of Aiken, that stable yard was the mecca of all Aiken horse lovers for 40 years. I'm looking at the picture. It's a 2-story building. The Hitchcock children were all on their horses. And that, we think, to the best of our ability, was on the other side of that stone wall that you've been referring to. And that structure has been gone for a long time. I know the Sanborn maps may have been off just a little bit. Obviously, they didn't have geo techniques that are now available. But in the 1990s, and I know some of you were here, and certainly there's people sitting in the audience that were a part of the historic districts, the defining and recognizing Historic 1, Historic 2, and Historic 3. And there was an overall significant revision in 1994 zoning. And unlike this meeting today, that zoning, all of the property owners were consulted. And we all could weigh in on that. And I think that's really important because certainly now being an American citizen for the last 20-something years, I value the fact that the United States values individual property rights. Understanding that we are in an historic district. Certainly we were in it before there was an historic district, but we are in it. That's why the application came to you for the renovations that the Kisners and their agent, retired architect Jeff Burden, was putting together. So that is something that I think is really important for everybody to think about. And I know there are a lot of people here tonight that have that concern about what property rights mean and about arbitrary changes without consulting homeowners. So I would like that to be noted on our concern. And lastly, that I want to make at this point is our stables are considered visible from the right-of-way. And of course, the standard is it doesn't matter if there's vegetation or a fence. If a portion of that structure can be seen without the trees there, it can be seen. Again, that is why our application was presented to the DRB in June for the change in the renovation. So it's very frustrating for me when we are talking about, and in the work session, and you talked about the fact that it was unknown that those stables were there. Because you can't use, in my opinion, you can't use the same level of, well, you can see this if not for those trees, right? So if we're saying that you couldn't see the barn and therefore it was not given an evaluation during the 1981 to 1983 or the 2010 historic the historic survey resource cards, I would say you have to use the same requirements. I mentioned very briefly, and I just want to read this because I think it's important, the survey methodology did not need for the surveyors to see the structure. They used, just like in your guidelines that you were using, the survey involved identifying winter colony properties, local primary and secondary sources through interviews, and knowledgeable local citizens. I would argue we're not knowledgeable about everything, but I can certainly tell you we're probably the most knowledgeable about our stables and our property, and yet no one consulted us. So I think you should look at what the parameters and what the methodology was used, and I would urge you all to not make this designation without our support. I think it is wrong. I think it is an overreach, and honestly, I don't think it's Aiken. And there are a lot of us that think Aiken is a pretty special place to be, and a lot of it is because of the people that we surround ourselves with. And I am so incredibly grateful tonight to have the community that really cares here to support this. That's what Aiken is about, not about putting a designation in without our consulting and without our permission. I think that is wrong, and I appreciate you letting us speak tonight.
No, oh no, I was going to ask for public comment. Yes. Please, we are limiting each person to 5 minutes. And if
5
you
minutes?
could,
I've never spoken at all, ever. My name is Pat Cunning, 113 Mulberry Court, Aiken, South Carolina. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I usually don't have that problem. 5 minutes, I better get going. I'm just up here to represent the silent majority, and before I leave, I'm going to have that silent majority stand up so you all see what kind of support the Kisners and the Bostwicks have. I actually owned a property that was designated. Y'all, this was back years and years ago on the York House. It's on the corner of Colleton and York, and you can definitely see it. Now that I don't own it, I'm glad I don't have to worry about painting it anymore. But anyway, my dad bought it in 1950, 6 months before the Savannah River site was announced, and it stayed full for about 10 years. I bought it from my dad about 30 years later, and then I received a letter from some group like y'all saying, would you want to put the property on whatever it was called, historical overlay or whatever. I thought about it. I was thinking about not saying yes, but given the fact that it was new, I didn't really understand all of it, and I didn't turn it down. Probably should have, because what happens is you basically, if you're in an overlay, and I'll say this to anybody, be careful about getting in an overlay because you basically have given away some of your property rights, which usually adds money, adds cost to your property. Anyway, the one thing I got a problem with, and I understand your answer, but it just doesn't seem right that you would present this. I mean, certainly there could have been somebody else to present this and not you as chairman of this committee. It just doesn't look right. I mean, it may be legal, but it don't seem right to me. But that's just me. I'm not a lawyer.
Is there,
Anyway.
we are voting on the designation tonight. Is
Right.
there anything in the designation that you would like to?
Well, the one
Speak
thing
to?
I would reiterate is the fact you should have told the owner of the property what you were doing. And it does strike me as really unusual that on the, it was Kevin and Brittany submitted the request on the 27th of June. That is 6 months ago, almost 6 months ago. You have yet to hear it. You presented yours right before the November meeting, and so the Kisners had to pull it again. That's not right, Madam Chairman. It really isn't. You should have heard. You should have heard the request. And the only other thing I can say is that I believe that a lot of this is about trying to delay this property from being heard, and can't tell me that this new designation you want to put on it, it's got to be harder or you wouldn't have done it. You still have the right to review the Kisner plan and go vote up and down on it, whether you like it or don't like it. Now, a big part of this is going to be whether part of it is savable. I think the plan is that Brittany and Kevin want to save part of it. But it seems to me you need to hear that. But I strongly recommend that y'all vote this down. I know you got to give it to City Council, but vote it down. The only other thing I got to say, I had a whole lot to say, I can't do it in 5 minutes. But finally, I would like to thank Tara and Charlie for all they have done for all the horse-related activities in Aiken over the years. The Bostwick family is a big part of history of Aiken. Why would they want to harm any property that is part of that history? They are trying to save it, not harm it, okay? That's the truth. And also with Kevin and Brittany, thank you for all you have done for all the children in need in the CSRA through the Kisner Foundation. You have truly made a difference in our community and continue to do so. Lastly, I would ask all those who want to support the Kisner and the Bostwick plan to stand up. That's the silent majority. Thank you very much.
Before we continue, I would like to clarify a couple of things that were said. And one is the last application that we received was November 1st. So it was a revised application for a certificate of appropriateness, and it was revised. So we're talking about a submission done in November 1st. It unfortunately wasn't submitted in time to make it to the November agenda, but so. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Linda Johnson, 515 Parkside Drive, speaking on behalf of the Historic Aiken Foundation Board. This isn't really about the Kisners or the Bostwicks right now. I think they're great, and I really want their application to be heard. This is about the designation process and what will serve you to move forward. The Historic Aiken Foundation believes that the Hitchcock stable should be designated as a historic property, contributing landmark, whatever you want to choose, because it does meet 3 of the criteria. And you heard a very long version that Rebecca read to you, but they are associated with key events in Aiken's history. They were a gathering place. They were built by the Hitchcocks. They had a strong association with Louise and Thomas Hitchcock and with Pete Bostwick and with Peter Green. They're important. They represent important people in the community. And finally, the stables embody some distinctive architecture. They really stand out from any other local stables in the shingle style, the rounded corners. So we strongly support recognizing their significance by designating the stables as either contributing or landmark, and a failure to do so would be a failure to honor a key piece of Aiken's history and architecture. But I'd also like to speak to the process and the DRB's role in this, because I'm not sure that's being fully recognized. The stables are a highly unusual circumstance. I don't know that we've ever had another application submitted where the property hadn't already been designated. So you already had that starting point. Unfortunately, the stables weren't evaluated during the 2010 survey. It was what was called a windshield survey, where they drove by the properties to look at them. They didn't even get out of the car. Now, possibly in an effort to move the application forward when they got the first application, it appears that the planning department took the initiative to designate and defaulted to non-contributing. And that was conveyed to the DRB in the first staff report. There were two honest mistakes made there. There's no default designation in the ordinances. The designation requires an actual consideration of the historic and architectural significance of a property. And further, the planning department doesn't actually have the authority to designate. That's reserved for city council, with recommendations made by the DRB and the planning commission. And I know that on learning of the absence of an actual designation, the DRB took this up to proceed on designation and make a recommendation. Required to by section 7.1.1 of the ordinance, that you're supposed to keep up the historic surveys and maintain the Aiken Historic Register. And another section that says that in reviewing any application, you need to consider the historic significance. You needed this information. So this isn't really a redesignation. It never was designated in the first place. You're doing a designation for the first time. All that said, given the delays that have resulted in this process, it's incumbent on the city that they find a very expedited way forward. Get through tonight, get through Planning Commission and Council, because the Bostwicks and Kisners need to have their application reviewed by you. And the community wants it to be reviewed so they can move forward with this property. So it's on the city to make this happen quickly. Thank you.
I will make this. My name is Catherine Stumberg. I live at 252 Chesterfield Street North, also a historic cottage. I'm originally from Texas. I came here to ride horses when I was 14. I lived at the Bostwick house. And actually, one of the names of my first horses is still visible if you look at the stables. So besides my incredible emotional connection to a piece of property that really did help save my life, I know, because out of nostalgia, I walked around the property. I got, when I moved back here about 4 years ago, and I got opinions. And what I'm looking for is a farm. I know for a fact that this, because of erosion of natural things, it's never going to be a stable again. There are so many things that I, applaud the Kisners, because I have seen their plan, and they are doing right by Aiken, by the property, by the Hitchcocks. I don't think we can rely too much on what we think the Hitchcocks would have wanted, because the Hitchcocks sold it. My parents own land in Texas, and it's beautiful land. But when they sold one of the pieces, the new owners are able to do whatever is legally right for it. And I really commend the Kisners also because their attachment to Aiken and the fact that they find this property so significant and have spared no expense on doing engineering surveys and figuring out what they can do. They actually looked at it, changed the location of where they'd like to put their house. And just to close out, like I said, this property, like I said, it saved my life. My horse's name is still on there. You can't see it from the street. Construction will not affect traffic. It is not a publicly available property.
Tonight, we're voting on the designation
Right, so the
application,
designation, like I
which
said,
doesn't restrict, we're not talking about restriction of building, or we're just
So
talking
the
about a
what I'm
designation
saying-
recommendation.
all right, what I'm saying is the designation of this is a historic stable. I understand where you're coming from, but if it is designated a historic property, you're just gonna watch it fall apart. So they're trying to restore it. The property's been on the market for 8 years. And they're trying to save what they can, but everybody else who has looked at it as what it was, a horse property, I don't understand how this particular piece of property that is actively falling down would benefit the history of Aiken, the Hitchcocks, or really any resident of Aiken to sit there and watch it rot. So, thank you.
Could I ask Ms. Stromberg a question? So I have a question for Ms. Stromberg, please. Could I have a question? Ms. Stromberg? Yeah. Stromberg, I'm sorry. I misunderstood your name. So the designation is to make it a contributing structure, which would not preclude the Kisners from doing exactly what they want to do. Are you in favor of it being a contributing property or in favor of that, since it won't preclude them from doing what they want to do? I'm not sure what you're
I'm
saying.
in favor of it.
You're in favor of it being
private property.
Well, it's
to
definitely
continue.
private property. It's about the designation.
I'm not in favor.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Can I speak?
There's someone that was been waiting, so. Thank you.
I am not in favor of designating. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Could you please state your name and address?
Yep. It's Jim Rhodes, 532 Glenwood Drive, Aiken. Without talking about the property, first of all, I want to congratulate Aiken for pulling off a great Hoofbeats parade. It was an 11-hour change. Original people, and I'm going to get to the Kisner's, Bostwick's Kisner's. It was a 11th hour, all of a sudden, the organizers said, we can't work with the city. They didn't know that I had the memorandum of agreement that the parade was ours, right? So we met with the city, and we got the parade going, and it was a very successful parade. But it was an 11-hour decision for another group to back out or put suggestions in. This is the same category, in my opinion, right? The application was submitted. After the fact, the designation wants to be changed. The designation originally, in the work session, we said 1984, that it was a major thing, and the lady that was in there said they didn't even know the property was there. Her words, not mine. 1994, we had a windshield wiper drive-by, whatever. It was not designated then. The property's been for sale for 8 years. We get a buyer that wants to improve the entire property, And then all of a sudden, we messed up. It should be designated. Baloney. It should have been designated either in 84 or in 90. Wasn't a mistake. It wasn't designated for a reason. I have heard racehorse barns. If we're not careful, we're going to lose the racehorse industry in Aiken. We already have. There's no horses at the Aiken training track. The racehorse industry has left Aiken. The historic significance of the racehorse people is over. Aiken is still an historic equestrian community. We showed that on Sunday, right? We're one Aiken trials away from shutting the Aiken training track down. One trials away. We have bad weather, we have COVID come up one time, they won't be able to operate. It's that way. I was on the board of the Aiken training track, I was on the board of the Whitney Barns. They were going to tear the Whitney Barns down. The city was. The trust didn't have the money to take care of them. The Whitney Barnes group, we took it over. We rebuilt 2 of the barns to usable state, to a destination for people to come into. We were told the cow barn was going to get tore down because it looked bad. We spent $300,000 of our money. We didn't raise it from the public. We tried to, but we didn't get the support. So we put our own money into it. And the cow barn is structurally sound now. But that was $300,000 that we had to do a loan of. Luckily, it's almost paid off because my name's on that note. But on that, the Whitney Barns were going to be torn down too. And a private group came in and helped them. Now, we had the storm and probably another $1 million worth of damage. They did a fundraiser, they raised $1,000. You know, we have more important things to worry about than private property. I respect every one of you. When we had the architect at the facility and them talking and all that, some of y'all were listening to the architect. Several of y'all were over there with your own agenda talking to the few transplants that weren't even concerned with what the architect was saying. And I have it on video if you want to see it, ma'am. I have it on video. You were not with the architect, period. And that's not right. We were there to see what the construction problems were with that building. And some of y'all didn't care. So I'm done, 5:04. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Steve Kisner, 3436 Summit Drive in Aiken. And I think all of you, I hope you read the letter I sent to you a couple months ago. My concern from the beginning has not been so much the issue before you, but the process. It's just been flawed. And Barbara, I want to thank you in that last work session that I attended where you made those comments. You said, I recognize we have problems with our process. There's been flaws in this process and we need to do better. And I think McDonald and John and Ben both followed up with that and agreed. And that still is what's bothered me today. And you're just going to have to put up with me for a minute, Faith, because I think that's a concern with this group, is the process that's going on in issues like this. We got to do better. We got to communicate. We're Aiken. We're not New York. We're not Maryland. Okay, excuse me. I shouldn't have said Maryland, but that's okay. Part of the problem, or a big part of the problem, is feedback. From the day they submitted their application, there's no feedback. But then we learned there's so much going on behind the scenes. And and they're not a party to that. That's just not right. I was personally shocked to see how involved the historic Aiken Foundation gets involved in these things without any communication or without any knowledge of the applicants. I want to read you something from their purpose, which is on the website, okay? It says, we collaboratively with government agencies, businesses, homeowners, and other historical societies share and coordinate information and resources. We collaboratively do that. By collaborating, we provide a collective voice for preserving, protecting, and planning in Aiken. Now, when does that ever happen? It's not happened in this process, for sure. And these guys are the people driving this, and it's like it's their own agenda. And we just got to stop that. And I appreciate the concern with these Aiken citizens. And this public forum gives us an opportunity to make that be known. And thank you, okay?
Could I ask Steve, were you for or against, Steve? Were you in favor or against the designation? I'm sorry. I heard what you said about the process. I'm not sure about the designation.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay.
I'm against the designation because of the way it was handled.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that's all I need to say. All right.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about calling you back up.
Good evening. I'm transplant Louis Rinaldini, and I live at 638 Magnolia Street. So I want to commend and support the Design Review Board in its actions to apply the historic preservation laws and guidelines of the City of Aiken in a thorough and even-handed manner in this project. This is not an easy project. And the only way out of where we are is to be fair and transparent and get the process, as I think Barbara has tried to, and others, all of you have tried to, back on a better track than where it got to. It is a bit of an issue and a problem, and I think Linda Johnson spoke about having it go faster and better, and I think everybody agrees with that. But historic preservation in Aiken is guided by the zoning ordinance of Aiken, the guidelines, which are the Historic Design Review Manual and the Secretary of the Interior Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties. And that's by law, because you're dealing with private property and you're putting restrictions on private property. So it has to be done in a lawful manner. Now, this Design Review Board is a quasi-judicial body, so it has to operate more or less the way a court does. It has to be thorough, so it has to get a complete record. Anything that is not on the record doesn't count. It has to examine everything that it should examine to make its decisions, and it has to be fair and transparent so that the community can understand what you've done. So, the zoning ordinances only recognize 3 designations for structures in historic districts: landmark, contributing, and non-contributing. These stables should have been designated. Unfortunately, they weren't. There's ample literature in understanding design review boards that what you do when that happens is you got to take a step back and correct it. So there's a well-documented record that the Hitchcock stables are historic and significant, so there's no question they qualify as contributing or landmark structures. The DRB and the applicants and anyone in the community can verify this by going to experts, and I would recommend you, if you want to, you can call up the South Carolina Historic Preservation Office, and they will tell you that if you meet these criteria, you are a contributing structure or a landmark. So there's nothing controversial in that. This is just the DRB doing its job, filling the record, getting the information that it needs to do what it's required to do. And I'm sure some of you wish that you didn't have to do this one, but this is what you're obligated to do by the law. The zoning ordinance requires the DRB to maintain and update the Aiken Historic Register. So if there's a property that is improperly designated, you have to fix that. Okay, so that's why I support this process. I just wanted to go as quickly as possible so that the application can be heard. By the way, if you don't designate it, you have to do this review anyway. So one way or another, you have to address this problem. Now, if you think of a court, a quasi-judicial body like you, can't make a decision on a subject if it doesn't know what your criteria for making those decisions are. You can't say, I'm going to evaluate this defendant. We don't know whether he committed a murder or whether he stole something, but we're going to, a court is going to have a trial regardless. So one of the things the court has to do before it proceeds, it has to establish the criteria by which it will do this. And by the way, that is in the law. As a quasi-judicial body, you have to go by the guidelines, and you can't go by the guidelines unless you know which ones apply. So this process, and the reason I recommend and support this designation, is because that brings clarity to everybody, so that, and I've told the Kisners this, and by the way, we have met with you to try to explain how it works, and we've met with... Okay.
Good evening. My name is Dean Keaton, 317 Coach Light Way, Aiken. And I don't support designating this property as historic primarily because I believe in liberty. But that being said, I think there's another way to do this if we can get together. I say, what if the Kisner family would purchase this property and agree to donate the stables to the Friends of the Woods? And what if the Kisner family would agree to take these stables apart piece by piece and reconstruct at least one of them at the entrance of Hitchcock Woods so that people could enjoy them? Where they are today, they're of no enjoyment to anybody. I couldn't find them if you put them on a map. But if they were in a place that people passed by them on their way into the woods, they would be worth something, and then they would particularly be historic at that point. They're not historic if they're just dilapidating and falling down, and nobody can get to them anyway except to trespass on somebody else's property. But what if we took them apart piece by piece? Kevin and Brittley could agree to pay for that if they would, put them back together, put at least one of them back together the way they were intended 100 years ago, and we could enjoy them possibly for another 100 years. I don't know if anybody's talked about that. I haven't talked to the Kisner family about that. They'll probably shoot me after the meeting, but because it would be very expensive for them to do. But the Kevin and Brittany Foundation have done lots of things like that for the good of the community, and they might do one more. That's it. Thanks.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Drew English. I live at 5 Coggins Point in Columbia. I'm a lawyer. I represent Tara and Charlie here. I don't represent Brittany and Kevin. Their lawyer couldn't be here. Just a couple of housekeeping matters. Ms. Seymour, this is a letter from their lawyer, Ross Apple. I'd just like to add to the record. When Tara and I were deciding who's going to go when,
should I go first? Should she go first? I said, well, you go first, because I wanted her to clearly establish that she doesn't need me to be here. And lawyers shouldn't be these things. These should not devolve into legal processes. Unfortunately, we have here, and I really have two legal points to make. The first thing is we're talking about section 5.2.2 of the ordinance, and there's been some discussion that this property must be designated in order for the Kisner's application to be heard. I respectfully submit that that's not the case. Because if you read 5.2.2, it basically sets forth the mechanism by which the designation happens. And zoning ordinances have to be read very strictly construed, and they must be strictly construed in favor of free property rights. That's the law in South Carolina. And if you read this, really what the city council as the legislative body was after here is that they wanted this to be a collaborative process. They wanted there to be communication. And of course they want the landowner to be involved in this. But to do this while the Kisner's application is pending, and it has been pending in some form or another for 6 months, it violates their time of application rights, because they were allowed and they could rely on the status of this property as non-contributing when they made this application. And there's references to it being non-contributing that staff actually put in. So that's what everybody proceeded under. And they've spent a lot of money, they've spent a lot of time doing this, and now, 5 months on, we get this that interrupts that process. And that's frankly just not fair. That violates their due process rights. And I hate to use these legal terms, but that's where we are now. And to do this at this point interrupts the whole process. And everybody here should be concerned about that, because if this goes forward and it's designated to be contributing, then what that tells the public is that nobody is going to be able to rely on anything, because it can be changed in the middle of the process. The rules can be changed. And that's just not what the city council intended when they enacted this ordinance. So that being said, I would just remind everybody that, and I think maybe it was Mr. Law mentioned that you could consider these things without there being a designation. I agree with that. But it does not need to be designated. Certainly Tara and Charlie oppose the designation, and would ask that you vote against it tonight. The other thing, and I need to say this just for the record, Ms. Hawks, you're the applicant in your role as chair of the Design Review Board, is that correct? Okay, well, I know the ordinance may allow that. There's a state statute that I think supersedes that. So for that reason, I would ask that you recuse yourself, certainly from the vote tonight, because I really don't think you have the right to do it legally. Thank you.
I have been told by the city that I do have the right statutorily, because we are quasi-judicial. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm an architect. So, yes. If you would have to come up, we're recording everything. So if you would like to come up and make a comment. Oh. You can't ask the attorney a question, but you can comment on the designation.
I just don't understand, and it's a
Can
legal
you state your
question.
name and
Sorry,
address,
Lisa
please?
Smith, and I live Aiken, in the city of Aiken.
Uh-huh.
But I have thoughts on this, but I just had a simple question. I have I think what I have is the application that you're considering. I'm just trying to understand the process. But it says it's from Jeffrey Burden, and that the owner is Tara and Charlie Bostwick.
Madam Chair, point of order. That's not the application. That is the application, but that's not what we're doing tonight. We're asking for any comments on the designation pursuant to the zoning ordinance. That's what we're asking for today.
Okay, I just,
But thank you. But when
understand
there
that
is a COA,
is there an application from the Kisners that's different than this, or?
that's a good question. It is not before us tonight. The only thing we're asking for is the designation for historical purposes. There is that issue as the Kisners and the Bostwicks and who's on the application. I get that. That'll be cleared up. But tonight is just for the designation.
Okay, so, it says, what I read, a historic contributing structure in the city of Aiken refers to a building recognized as having historic significance and contributing to the character of a designated historic district. And I think that's what you're trying to decide, that's it? I think everyone agrees that the barn is historic and significant. From the real
Can
estate
you-
listings and the comments that we saw, you know, from the Bostwicks, from Mr. Burden, and from Tara herself when we went to the public meeting, they both described how the barn was unique and special and historically important. So that seems like a simple decision. Although I would say it's a shame that this town is so wrapped up in this and that it's all, everyone is taking everything so personally because, and then so many accusations. And I know that all of you are volunteers and I hate that you're feeling, you know, that you're being harassed and I'm being harassed for having an opinion on this, which I think we're all entitled to.
Thank you. Yes, of course.
Brittany Kisner, 832 Fermata Place. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you all for your time. I do echo the sentiments of we appreciate this, and I know this is a long meeting, and I do thank all of you board members for being here and for the due diligence that you have put in reviewing this application. My point of view tonight is to vote against the designation on this application, not because I disagree that the barns are not beautifully historic and very important to Aiken. They are. That has been demonstrated beautifully. And I think ultimately, when Kevin and I have the chance to present our application with the Bostwick family forward, you'll see that I think ultimately, most of us in this room are all on the same team. We all want what's best for the barns. But specifically for tonight, I think my recommendation or my feeling is no words could have been spoken better than Tara's as the property owner, and the history that the Bostwick family has and how important they are to Aiken. Also procedurally, I understand that all of you on this board are trying to do what is right. And I respect the credentials you all have, and I really, I understand that. But from our viewpoint, those guidelines that you keep, and I'm not an attorney, certainly, but the attorney, advising us from, and when I keep reading those specific guidelines in the zoning ordinance that y'all are talking about, I see, again, what Drew alluded to. It talks about designating a historical structure, but I don't see where that designation has to be made tonight for our application to be heard. Again, I'm not an attorney. I also find you have to understand that as a citizen of this community, we've all talked about the process, and frankly, I think everyone, wants to go home at this point, and I understand. But I think we all know it can be done better, and I appreciate everyone's efforts to work in that direction. So I respect all of that. I think there have been so many nuances, changes. I respectfully disagree. I believe we were on the November 5th agenda because we were posted online, and then that was pulled last minute. The meeting was canceled last minute because of the election, and then the chair submitted her application for designation the next day. And I understand that's based on, you feel like you're following the guidelines, but you have to understand, as a citizen, we feel like so much has been done under the table that this designation is being pushed forward ultimately for a reason. Maybe that's inaccurate, but I'm speaking for myself as a citizen who has an application, who wants their application to be heard. again, ultimately, we all want to do what's best for the barns, and I hope we do get to be heard because we have a beautiful plan. And I would love to work with so many of the people in this room on being stewards of the history and carrying that story forth. But that is why I would be against the designation, the vote in favor of that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Greg Ryberg. I live at 245 Berry Road, the entrance to the Palmetto Golf Course. I've sat here for an hour and listened to both sides. I certainly do not support that designation at this point in time. I think what we have done here is a grave injustice to two different parties, okay? The Bostwicks and the Kisners. And there's no place to look except within yourself because you all decided to make the decision to delay it. My concern is this, is that you take a vote and that designation is such that you're going to do further work, you're going to send it to planning and then send it to city council. This is, to me, gets down to a point, it's about money. It's not fair. Not fair what you did to the Kisners. It's not fair what you did to the Bostwicks relative to money. And at the bottom line is it's about money, and what you're doing is absolutely not right. And so what I'm concerned about is you vote and you keep it in play, and the Kisners sit there and the Bostwicks sit there, and they don't have a clue what's going to happen. Not a clue. And you all are playing a game. And hopefully there are 4 of you that are not interested in the game. And if you're going to vote on it tonight, I hope those 4 understand this thing needs to get back to the two couples getting together and deciding what's fair in the purchase of this property.
Yes.
My name is, I live at 412 Pendleton Street. The guidelines, the historic district overlay, the process was established by, I think, an intelligent group of Aikenites because the historic district benefits everyone inside the district and outside the district. It benefits everybody. So that's why this, there's the process because of all of us who benefit from it. A contributing status allows for demolition if the building is structurally unsound. If it's proved that you can have demolition with a contributing status. I think we all agree that it is historic, architecturally and historically. I'm also interested, we've talked about the history that we know of, but what about the history we don't know of? That the building might present that we don't know the architects, okay? We don't know the builders. We don't know who did that. So a lot of time with, I'm a Marylander, I'm a transplant. I came to Aiken to go to college here, play soccer. I majored in history. I went back, got more school, and I came back, and I'm being told something sometimes about the history of Aiken, that it's not what the buildings represent. So I'm also interested, and also this is not just, I do understand, but this is contributing status buildings help get oversight for demolition, partial and full, because those decisions are irreversible. This is, and so that's why we have that, because they're irreversible. you can't go back once and that information there can be gone that no one is even known about. I've looked at some of the we're just getting now started with like the McGee's, are just being designated as architects. They've only been, contractors. So we don't know who built the building. So we have to think forward in that aspect of things. I do think, again, the contributing status allows for demolition. I don't know, partial, if they can't be proved, and so it's something to go forward on. And I just think we need to, try to think about that. I know there's been delays. I know they've talked about expediting things. I know we had, election, and then there was, Hurricane Helene. But again, contributing status, because, does allow partial demolition if it's proven to be. And so again, the district benefits everyone. People want to come to live there. Economically, there's been, people that come and talk about numerous times the economic development of our historic district, what it does for all of us. So just continue to think that with this decision. And then also think about what happens when, we have another historic building that is of contributing status, a landmark status, and it comes before you. And, you want to make sure that you're following that. I understand the process. I know it's taken time, but again, please remember that, and that's why they consider about the demolition part of things, that it is irreversible, and that's why, you do that. But again, if something's not structurally sound, it can be looked at and considered. So there is flexibility there. It's not, I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Thank you for thinking about all of Aiken, all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Very quick. Kathleen Sullivan, 196 Rock Maple Court, Aiken. We love this property. We looked at it 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago over and over again. There's no way to make it a horse property, and we built another beautiful farm in a different place. All I can say is that if all these people who think it should be fixed, why didn't they? 8 years. They could have raised some money, bought it, done it. They didn't. What are you going to do with it? Nobody wants to keep their 28 horses on a small property. Not in this day and age. The welfare of horses is not meant to be living like that anymore. Yes, 100 years ago. Nobody's going to make it a barn. Let the Kistners do what they're going to do, or it's going to fall down. And if all these people who think it should be saved come up with your money, why didn't you do it in the last 8 years? Fix it up and do whatever you want with it. It still is America. It is property rights, and the way this process has occurred seems terribly unfair. So I am very much against the designation. Thank you very much.
Yes. You wanted to? Yes.
Harrison Howell, DRB survivor on Hain Avenue. I built a wooden fence. You guys approved it. You guys should see it. It looks great. I just wanted to talk really quick about Mr. Kisner's, the senior one's point about the process here. I don't think it's gone very well. I know there's some members of city council in here, and I would really ask them to consider having staff take a look at the guidelines. One thing I really want to talk about is at the last work session, we were talking about ex parte communication. I tried to talk to Stuart about that, and that was a decision made by a former legal counsel to the DRB. And I can kind of see why we had that position at one point. That was shortly after the hotel and Project Pascalis, but I think we've moved past that. I think from what I've heard in the work sessions, it sounds like that moving forward with this designation is a requirement. It feels like this is not voting in favor would do what's right by the property owners, the Kisners, the Bostwicks. But I think it's actually a disservice to the process and everyone else who lives in the historic district. Thank you.
anyone else like to speak? No? Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Tori McQuinn. I live at 1033 Hain Avenue Southwest as well. So I wrote this whole thing, but I tried to scribble some new stuff down based on what some folks have said. But really, I'm really saddened by what things have kind of come to. We're arguing today around whether or not a structure that is clearly historic should or should not be designated as historic. The Zillow listing calls out the importance of the property's history. And so I think it's clear that we all feel in our heart that the property is historic in some way. I understand the lack of frustration with the DRB. I've gone through the DRB before. It wasn't a great process. I think there's a lot of things that we can do to make it better. The lack of communication between all the parties is something that I think really needs to be worked on. I do think the Kisners should have known about this application being brought forward. But with that being said, we should all strive to work together to preserve the history of the city, and we have to have a process to do that. And it has, a process has to be at the city level to do so. But it does need to be better. So I will say I do think this property should be designated as historic, but we should move as quickly as possible so that we can see the Kisner's application, because I'm sure it'll do well by everybody that lives here, and will do well by the property.
Thank you. With no further comment from the public? Are there questions from members of the DRB or any discussion?
So yeah, I'll initiate discussion. Madam Chairman, can I have permission to initiate discussion?
Of course.
All right, so the issue is pretty black and white with the zoning ordinance, and I'm not saying that what the kids have done or will do in the future is not great things. But with the due diligence here, what we have is a process. We all can talk about what the DRB has done in the past. You mentioned 1984, I wasn't born. 1990, I wasn't born. But if there is an opportunity to get it right, we're going to get it right. I stand here to say, or I sit here to say, the facts of the matter is, from the definitions of contributing structure and landmark property, one can argue both ways. With it being a contributing structure, there is no law, no rule against partially repurposing a facility or structure or demoing the structure. If somebody wanted to railroad you, or if there's an attempt to railroad you, they would, chairperson woman would clearly say landmark structure, which means that there would be no changes to that specific structure. I understand that the DRB, as far as the processing with the number of applications, Rebecca, I feel very sorry for you at some points of times. The workload has been tremendously high. But what I will also state is that, not discrediting what's going on, not saying that the time limit or the time that the application has taken has not been long, because I empathize with you. I'm very compassionate toward you. All I can say is, regardless of how this vote comes out, that this process or this application should be moved expeditiously. With that stated, I, as a builder, don't see if there was a fact of the matter that the application or the recommendation was made to planning and also to council that it was a designated structure, however it was voted. If it is a contributing structure, it's black and white. Structures 50 years or more, check mark. Historical importance, check mark. That it would be considered contributing. I would also like to say that the clarification, because I had questions about this as well, but I actually clarified later on that there was an oversight made in the surveys. we all human. If you show me a person that in here that has not made a mistake, now albeit twice, you should catch it the second time, but it didn't happen, that the structure was not designated. That does not necessarily mean that it is a non-contributing structure. Those are two different things. So with that stated, when individuals come to the podium and say it was a non-contributing structure, I'm thinking to myself, it was probably not classified or not designated. So those are some things that was brought to my attention. But guys, we're gonna work past this. We're gonna get together, and I promise you, we're gonna be fair and impartial in all our processes, and we'll stand with you on that. And we want to see progression. We want to see buildings repurposed. We want to see growth in the city of Aiken, and we're not here to railroad you. Railroad would be landmark. I can promise you that. That's not the case, and that's all I got to say about that, Madam Chairperson.
I'd like to make a comment also, or something for discussion. So, is it not on, or am I not close enough? I'm sorry. We've all sat through this now for a month or two, and I think and everybody in the audience and everybody on the board is very frustrated with this whole process. I think mostly myself and the board members are frustrated with all of the legal opinions because they are overwhelming and stifling, quite frankly. We are all very disappointed with the delays. This is taking entirely too long. Quite frankly, I don't know what to do about it, because the legal opinions say, well, it has to take this long. Well, that's very frustrating because I own property in Aiken, and I've been in front of this board before as an applicant, and the times that I've been in front of the board, I had excellent communications with the board through staff. And I hear the Bostwick's frustration with not being a part of communications. I think that's absolutely wrong. Again, I'm not sure what to do about it, but I'd like to figure out a way to fix that situation, because I think the property owners have to be fully informed and involved in the process all the way through it. And Pat Cutting stood up earlier and talked about the York House and about whether he wasn't sure what to do. I could completely sympathize with that. But I think that when we get into a designation process like this, it's very much like an HOA. Once you're in, and it's overwhelming to everyone in the room, the historically significance of the property, that there's a no-brainer there. I mean, it's probably one of the most significant properties in Aiken, right on the border of Hitchcock Woods, the namesake. So the choice seems obvious, I think, to a lot of people in the room as to what should be done. And the fact that the designation of a contributing structure would still allow the Kisners to do what we think they want to do, because we still don't have the application to even review. I haven't reviewed your application. So it's just very frustrating, the whole process. So my heart's broke. My heart goes out to all of you guys. But I think for me personally, as a citizen of the United States and as a board member, that I've got to vote my conscience. And at the end of the day, I would have a hard time approving something if the property owner is not in favor of it. And I think that if we had worked better and communicated more, we would not be at the situation we find ourselves at now, which is the property owner is against it. And so that's what I'm frustrated about. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, can I have the floor? I want to paraphrase what I'm going to say with this. I live in the historic district. I have been in front of this group when I was on the planning commission. There's something wrong in the process when you have this many citizens that are having to come out and make a stand. when there's not a continuity of process that brings everybody to the table at the same time to come to a unilateral combination of ideas that make things move forward. When we have something that divides the community so much, there's something drastically wrong with the process and with the evidence. Many of us on here have been fighting for change and process change for a long time. That was one of the reasons why I accepted the nomination to sit on this board. I grew up in this town. I moved away. We came back for Christmas. It's funny we should talk about it. And my wife, I just finished buying a piece of property outside of Atlanta and going to build a house on a golf course. And my wife and I came here and visiting relatives, and I said, why in the world did we want to not live in Aiken? And I sold the property and we moved to Aiken. So say that to say this, history is a great thing. I grew up on South Boundary among all the horses. We used to sneak into the paddocks and ride the horses bareback. We could do that because we had sugar and carrots with us. So anyway, long story short, there's a lot of history, a lot of culture in Aiken. We want to see it preserved. We wouldn't be sitting here and putting the hours in it if we didn't think so. So I'm not against that, but I am against a process that is flawed, that is broken, that divides the community in half. And I think that everybody needs to be involved in all the process from beginning to the end. Somebody said that it needs to be a part of the community. It needs to be viable. It needs to be the visibility of everything that goes on needs to take place. I agree with that too. And I bought in the historic district because I knew what it was all about. In fact, my realtor that sold me the house is sitting out in the audience right now, and she told me what I would have to do, and she wasn't wrong because we had to do a lot of things. But in any event, the process is broken. We need to fix it. We need to work towards that, but we need to do it in such a way that it brings community together, and we work together to make this a greater community than even we are now. So I'm not going to be in favor of this process. Thank you.
I'm the newest member on this board, and I got put on the board for 3 reasons. I said I want to be a part of a solution because clearly something was been broken. I appealed the DRB before. I was terribly concerned about what it was doing to neighbors and friends, and it was turning neighbors against neighbors and friends against friends. There's something inherently wrong. I think I spoke about that at the work session last time, and I probably spoke too much because I was so frustrated, because as quasi-judicial people, it's very difficult to explain that we're not allowed to tell you certain things. I wish we could. I'm a retired lawyer, didn't want to deal with anything. I dealt with criminal stuff, so this is different. So we ask for legal help because we want to do it legally. Why? I don't think any lawsuits are going to create better understanding on either side. That's the biggest concern I have, is that if we don't look at this process and what's required of us, then we're going to be back into this quagmire. And I know all the lawyer comments, okay? I don't think that's what we need. We need to have better communication. Now, a lot of people are here because they have a right to be outraged about what happened. They do. And I'd love to, I can't wait to have an opportunity to explain it in detail. A lot of it came about because there was a concern from the very beginning that the process wasn't filed back in June and July. That was done. There was concern. Wait. But we lost a lawyer. We had a lawyer that was guiding us, and he died tragically in August. The application that came in June was not the same one that's in October before us. There's an inherent problem because this board is required by the zoning ordinance to determine what the historical significance is. We can't shirk that responsibility. I wish we could. It'd be easy. But we have to do it. And what we've done, everyone kind of agrees. The people I know in this room, most of them, we know that this is a property that means something to us. Do I think it needs to be a landmark? No. Because if it was a landmark, everybody would be going, how dare we do it to somebody that wants to take and improve property? No one is against improving property, especially making it something that Aiken can do so well. Aiken has done it with Joy Cottage Stables, an incredible piece of property. There's no longer have horses. The Nandina Stables, an incredible property. I think somebody else lives in a stable or close to a stable. Ryberg's, was that part of a stable? I think. But they don't have to be for horses. They can be beautiful residences. Beautiful. But our job today, what we heard from the lawyer, it's not secret. The lawyer told us, you cannot act on a COA until a determination on how it is to be recognized is done. We can say, oops, we can point fingers and blame. We can blame till the cows come home. It's not going to help us. We have to go, what can we do that is fair for everyone? And the process requires us to make a determination. No one in this board is trying to railroad somebody for a landmark. I don't think anybody's saying that. Why? Because we know enough, as what you all have said, that these stables are past the use that they were, and that, as Tara said, they could make it something special. And they have a right to make it something special. But we have a right and requirement as this board, and again, what is the saying? A lawyer's never supposed to take advice, give your own advice. Okay? I don't have my own advice. I asked the lawyer that is competent on this, what is the right thing to do to protect everyone in the future, so we don't muddle this mess and have Piscalis 2.0 and we pay lawyers too much money, no offense to the lawyers making money, none of us up here are making money, to continue to muddle this. We deserve better as a community to maybe understand that this is required by statute. We can, I will apologize. I've been outraged. I've spoken my outrage in a public session already. But I feel like there is no choice for us except to make what the zoning law told us we had to do, which was determine the significance. Is it landmark? You could argue it is. You really could argue that something that is the Hitchcock people touched and loved and rode on, and the Bostwicks did. I have memories of that stable and how powerful it was. But we can't, it doesn't make sense to make it landmark. What this board has done, we are not the final arbiters. We are just passing it on. And what I asked at the last meeting was, for goodness sakes, let's make it expeditious as possible. Let's move it. Let's move it fast. We'll make a specially designated meeting. We did that. We tried to make sure there was the communication that was broken is fixed as best we know. And therefore, the designation that we have to do to stop the mess of making lawsuits the answer is to pass on a historical determination. And I think contributing allows what most of us desire, and that our neighborhood, my neighborhood, can be infused again with family that love it and want privacy and want to have a legacy impact on that privacy. I don't think anyone is against that. And I apologize for the lack of understanding, the frustration on all of our parts, but I really believe that something good could come out of this, and you have my promise as a new board member that I will work with realtors, community people. I want you all to come every time we have a meeting. Sometimes it lasts till 11 o'clock at night. But we all have to vote our conscience. We have to vote our conscience and understand what we're causing when we vote our conscience. And if I'm being told and quoted the section of the law that tells us it is required for, before we consider a COA, I've looked, I know it's going to be okay, but we have to do a designation, and that the designation of contributing allows the future to be bright for the COA coming, then we need to do that and not create further legal problems. And I appreciate everybody showing up. I want everyone to come and join and ask questions, and I want you to come at the COA, and anytime you want to come here, come on. I apologize that you did not have copies of every piece of law that we've had to look at. Maybe you would like it. But I just wanted to clarify, I've already apologized. I joined because I want to be a part of the solution. And I joined because, as I told my council person, whatever is turning neighbor against neighbor and friend against friend, we need to fix. And I'm committed to fixing that, but I have to pay attention to what the law requires of me.
Yeah. Madam Chairman, I'd like to, did you have something to say?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to, I actually agree with what everybody has said here tonight, to be perfectly honest. I don't blame the applicants or the citizens for being completely frustrated with the process. I am as a board member as well. I understand exactly what Tara Bostwick was talking about. It is in the zoning law. It says, you know, and I don't need to read it to you, but it says, you know, a member of the board or a member of this or the owner thereof has the right to make a designation. I think that's wrong. I think it needs to be changed. Unfortunately, we are beyond that now. That's not where we are now. But I look forward to making these, going to city council and working with the board to make these changes. Another thing that we are particularly frustrated about, and I'm also a very new member, came on the same time that Barbara did, and so much of what we wanted to do, we were told we could not do. We couldn't talk to the applicants. We can't share how we feel with the applicants because it's an ex parte. We can barely even talk to each other because for all sorts of reasons, I think a lot about because of Biscalis. And it's very frustrating because I think that if we had sat down and been able to talk with the applicants, none of this would have happened. I also, I think that the laws for the designation should be changed. I think that owners should be required to be part of it. Unfortunately, that's not where we are now. And I agree with Barbara that we have been told by our lawyer that we cannot act on a COA for demolition in an historic designation without considering the significance of the structure that may be demolished totally or partially. And that is the fix we're in. I hate that we're in this fix, but that is where we are, and that is where we are now. And I honestly believe that the fastest way forward in this is to go ahead and make the determination according to the law. Contributing does not, with the second, from what I can see with the second application that was made, I don't see how it could have any kind of a negative effect with stopping that application from going through very quickly. If we don't do that, I'm afraid we're going to get held up even more. So where I feel that I have to, vote my conscience is that we have to do what our lawyer has advised us that we must do. Vote on the designation for contributing. I would not be in favor as landmark. And expedite this as quickly as possible so we can get the Kisner-Bostwick application before us, and we can move on with that. And then after that, I think that we need to have I know the zoning ordinance is going to be changed. It is going to be rewritten. And I look forward to working with City Council on that to make some very, very important changes, many of which you have talked about tonight. But where we are right now, and that's why I wish we could just sit down and talk about it, say, well, if we don't do this, this might happen. If we don't do this, this might delay it. My concern right now is to get this matter over with so that the application can get before us as quickly as possible. And for that reason, I agree with Barbara that we have to go through with the designation vote. It is not a final decision, it's a recommendation only.
Yeah, Madam Chairman, I really don't disagree with your assessment that the stables would merit a classification or designation as contributing. And I think there have been enough changes that landmark probably isn't appropriate. But I think the process, though, is the problem, and I disagree with that. And we're getting contradictory legal advice about whether we can or cannot hear. I was ready to hear the application. Regardless, I don't need somebody to tell me it's contributing or non-contributing. We have 20 or 30 pages on the history of the stables, and I think all of us are in agreement with that. I don't believe anybody would come up and say, oh, they're not historic. So I just feel like our process, when it's getting to the point where people who live in the historic district feel like they're being penalized, or they prefer not to live in the historic district, and we've had that occur in the past. I hope we don't get to that again. I think that it can be an unwieldy process, and I don't care what the lawyers say, where they're from, whatever. We live here, we have to live with one another. And if it causes this kind of dissension, I'm not in favor of it. I'm willing to hear the application and use our best judgment. I agree with your assessment of contributing, but I'm not ready to designate it that way.
Well, I agree with everything everyone has said, and I certainly understand that the communication has not been good. It hasn't been successful. Certainly listening to everyone and seeing everyone here, reading the paper, it's been very clear that this hasn't been a smooth process, that's for sure. And with everybody, what I think is so interesting is that everybody believes that this is an historic property. And what we're here tonight to do is just say, yes, it is an historic property. We should have communicated and worked with the owners on this application. There's no question. And I'm so sorry that we did not do that. And it came to this. But what we're voting on now is really a contributing designation, which leaves many opportunities for, renovation, addition, partial demolition, all of these different things, with everybody knowing that this is an historic building, and that's what we're here to do. I'm the least articulate of everyone here on the board, I would say. And I'm an architect. I'm not a lawyer. It's been very confusing going through this process. And I would like, as everyone has stated, we really want the process to be quick, efficient, and clear, and not make people feel like we're going against your property rights. That's so against kind of what, you know, we're about. So I appreciate everybody coming and giving their comments. I think we're really going to learn a lot from this process. Thank you. Yes. Well, we need a motion to vote. Is there a motion? Chair does not make a motion.
Madam Chairman, I move that the BRB recommend the Hitchcock Stables for listing in the Aiken Historic Registry as a contributing property.
I second that motion.
All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Is it 3-3? Yes. 4-3. Having considered the nomination, the materials, and the DRB's vote, the Aiken zoning ordinance designation criteria, we will now move to approve forward with the vote of yes. So we are recommending the Hitchcock Stables for inclusion in the Aiken Historic Register as a contributing historic property. And again, this is a recommendation that will go to planning, and then it will go to city council, and we'll work to make it as quickly as possible. Meeting is adjourned.